Hello and welcome to OpenNMS 102. This is a series of training courses for the OpenNMS Network Monitoring Platform. Unlike the OpenNMS 101 series, the 102 lessons are designed to stand alone, so you can watch these in any order, but we do expect you to understand the content covered in the OpenNMS 101 class because we're just going to expand on that one. In this lesson, we are going to talk about the Snmp MIB compiler that comes with OpenNMS. If you'll remember, the Simple Network Management Protocol is used by OpenNMS for two main things: getting events into OpenNMS and doing data collection, so we can graph data and do thresholds and things like that. The events are called Snmp Traps. Basically, Snmp has a mechanism for sending events to a management station, such as OpenNMS, but we need to convert the format of those events into something that OpenNMS can recognize. And in the event lesson in OpenNMS 101, we actually wrote it out. We actually had the XML that said, hey, when this event happens, this is what we look for. This is what matches the event. It's a lot easier to do it if you have a particular MIB file. So let's say you have some devices. You've gone into the setup for that device and said, hey, send traps to your OpenNMS instance. You may get events that say unformatted. And these are events, Snmp traps, that OpenNMS received that it didn't understand. And so one of the ways you can do to fix that is you can actually go and load in a MIB. Now, I have a couple of MIBs that I want to deal with today from Polycom. So these are some Polycom MIBs. These actually came from one of our support customers. As part of OpenNMS support, we do actually help you compile your MIBs if you're having issues. They got these MIBs from Polycom, and they were having problems getting them into OpenNMS. So I figured they'd be a really good example to get this stuff into OpenNMS. I won't be able to demonstrate actually doing like data collection because I don't have any of these devices, but at least you'll get the basic idea on how to do this. Now, MIB files are text files. So let's look at this Polycom base MIB. They're text files written in a language called Abstract Syntax Notation, ASN.1. And they have a format. You can read it. And this Polycom base MIB is actually not very useful. It defines a module called Polycom, which happens to be object 13885 under enterprises. So the private enterprise ID for Polycom is 13885. So this means that all of the Polycom traps will probably have an enterprise object ID starting out .1.3.6.1.4.1.13885. Now, a lot of vendors have these base MIBs, which usually include more information than this. And so instead of actually having to define Polycom in each of the MIBs, it will actually just refer to Polycom. It can import Polycom from this Polycom base MIB definitions. None of the Polycom MIBs do that. And to do Snmp right can be difficult. There's not a lot of expertise out there. And so I don't really blame them for not doing this right. But we're going to see some other issues that they run into in their MIBs as we try to compile them. Now, one of the questions we used to get frequently is that someone's trying to define some events. They have some unformatted events coming from a particular vendor, and they want to define them in OpenNMS, and they say, hey, I tried to compile the MIB, and I didn't get any events. Well, events actually are of two types. There's an object called a trap type, capital TARP -type, something like that. Or in the case of Snmp version 2, it'll be notification type. And what I can do is I can actually just grep for notification type in the following files, and you'll see we get a whole bunch of hits here. As this is from the RMX, the Polycom RMX MIB. There seems to be the majority. There's the DMA MIB, which has a bunch, and then there's the CMA MIB, which has a bunch there as well. So I know that if I get these to compile, that I will actually get a good number of these events to find. And you can Google. Usually I take the object ID from an unformatted event and Google it, and that can usually point you into a good place to try to find the MIB you need. Since I'm not actually trying to do an unformatted trap, I just want to format these MIBs. I don't have an example to use. Okay, so let's go back to the GUI. So here I am on my main page. I'm going to go up under my name, since I'm an admin user, to configure OpenNMS. At the very bottom, you'll see this additional tools. If you don't see this additional tools and you're missing a few other menu items, something may be wrong with your Carafe instance. This is one of the applications built on a technology called Carafe. And what we're going to end up doing is, if it's missing, one of the things you could do is stop OpenNMS, delete the opt OpenNMS data directory, and restart OpenNMS. It'll recreate that directory, and sometimes that'll clear up Carafe issues. Otherwise, you may want to get into the IRC channel or someone, and someone might be able to help you out. But this is working fine, as it will most of the time, and so I'm going to go to the Snmp MIB compiler. And here we have a list of all the MIBs that we compiled and sent into sent with OpenNMS out of the box. Not very, very many of them. And I'm going to add my MIB. So I'm going to upload a MIB, and I'm going to go and I'm going to grab this Polycom CMA MIB. So I'm going to open it. You'll see from the logs that it was successfully uploaded. So this Polycom CMA MIB lived on my local machine, and I just uploaded it to the OpenNMS server. And I'm going to right mouse click on this, and I'm going to hit compile MIB. Boom. Error. Dependencies required. ITU alarm TC MIB and the INET address MIB. This is common. If I actually edit this MIB, you'll see in the very first section what it's doing is a sanity check on these imports. These little dashes is a comment, so this line's actually ignored, and so it gets date and time, truth value, and textual convention from this MIB, SNMP2, SNMPv2 TC, which, as you can see, is in one of our compiled MIBs, etc., etc., etc. And it gets a few things here that are not included, and so it's like, hey, I need to find those. Now, unless you're like me and have a huge collection of MIBs that you've collected over the years, you probably need to just Google this INET address MIB, etc., to try and find out where it is. So I'm going to go here. Let's just Google this. And you'll see here are a bunch of links. You can see here, I like to look for things that are just like text files. I mean, there's one right here too I could do, because a text file is just simply the MIB. So here I found one. This is off of the NetSNP website, INET MIB, and so I'm going to get this up a little bit bigger. And so here are a bunch of different things that the INET MIB uses. So I could just right mouse click and just save page as, and it should save it as a MIB file. And then I can go over here to my MIB compiler, add the INET address MIB. That'll load it in, compile it. Notice it compiles without a problem. Boom. So now if I try to actually compile this MIB, I'll get the ITU alarm TC MIB as an error. So let me go back. Again, Google is your friend. So I went do a search. And here we have this one. Notice this says IANA ITU alarm TC MIB. I thought they were the same thing. They're not. So what I ended up doing was finding this this section here on the ITC alarm TC MIB. So here we ended up here, and we've got all of this the MIB stuff here. So I can look at the raw. Thank goodness it's GitHub. So here I happen to have the raw ITU alarm TC MIB definitions. Again, right mouse click, save page as, go back to my MIB compiler, upload the MIB, open it, right mouse click, compile. Now that's compiled. Once I've compiled these go into my compiled tree, and I never have to do it again. So if I happen to load in another MIB that requires the INET address MIB or the ITU alarm TC MIB, they will just work. So I don't have to worry about that. So now I can go and compile the Polycom MIB. Oh, got an error, parse error. This is very, very common. You know, expecting a sign op, found description on row 17. So let me go ahead and edit this MIB. And I'll go down into row 17, and you can see here, it's got last updated organization, contact info. I've got 2 description files here. And I think that that's not allowed. So I'm going to delete the second one, save this, and I'm going to compile it again, and voila, it compiled. So now I have my Polycom CMA MIB compiled. Note that we use an SMI library. We actually use a library to parse all of our stuff that's very strict. I mean, it actually goes into It implements the standards as they were written, and so if someone just decided, hey, I'm going to use 2 descriptions where there should only be 1, it will error out. Unfortunately, it'll kind of tell you where the error is, but it's not very good at telling you exactly what the problem is. So I'm going to clear the log. I'm going to add another MIB. I want to add that RMX MIB. So again, add the RMX MIB, and I hit compile MIB. Boom, dependencies required, RFC 1215. Now, I'm not 100% sure. You notice that some of these RFCs, like 1212, is RFC-1212, and then some are RFC 1155-SMI. I think you're probably only allowed 1 dash, and they use it between the RFC and the number if that's all there is, but if there's something like a -MIB or -conf, they get rid of that. Luckily, I happen to know that the RFC 1215 MIB is something that actually ships with NetSNMP. If you followed the OpenNMS 101 course, then you know that we actually have a, we installed NetSNMP and NetSNMP utils. And if you go into user, share, and all the way down toward the bottom to SNMP, user/usr/share/SNMP MIBs, and there's a whole bunch of MIBs there. So I'll dump down to here, and there's RFC 1215, so I'll open that. Again, it gets loaded. I need to compile it. It gets compiled, and now I should be able to compile the RMX MIB. Notice this slams us with an error. Unexpected error on line 38, RMX status textual convention. Unexpected token. So it's like, I wasn't expecting this token. This one took a little bit longer. While people who understand SNMP are pretty rare, Jeff Gelbach, one of our guys, is kind of an SNMP god, and so he helped me out. If you go and actually look at the RFC 2579, which defines textual convention, you'll see the name of the textual convention must consist of 1 or more letters or digits with the initial character being an uppercase letter. If you notice here, RMX status starts with a lowercase letter. That is enough to kick out the MIB compiler. Some MIB compilers will ignore it. Ours doesn't. I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's better to be more exact than not. Some people say, well, it's a lot harder to use OpenNMS because it doesn't ignore these little things. Well, I don't know what to say to that. Anyway, I can either edit it here, but since I'm going to do a search and replace, I think it's easier to do it on the file itself. So I'll go to my local file, and I'm going to edit Polycom RMX MIB. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to globally replace RMX capital S status with capital RMX capital S status. I replaced it on 3 lines. So I'll save that. Now I can go back to OpenNMS. I'm just going to delete this instance of the MIB that's in the pending. Upload my new version. So I'm going to go back to here. Boom. Load that guy in. Now I'm going to compile it, and this time it compiled properly. So as you can see, there's usually a few hurdles that you have to jump through. Now, certain vendors like Cisco, not to just call them out or pick on them, they tend to be pretty good. You may have a dependency, and when you try to load that dependency, you have another dependency. Once you dig through it and you've built up a nice collection of compiled MIBs in your MIB tree, you'll find out that it becomes a lot easier to bring MIBs in. Now, as I mentioned, there's 2 things we can do. If I right mouse click on this RMX MIB, I can generate events and I can generate data collection. So let's start by generating events. So I click generate events. Now, all events in OpenNMS are identified by a string called the unique event identifier, or the UEI. And we have to add a UEI for this. Now, what the tool does is it says uei.opennms.org/traps/ and then it gives the name of the MIB. That's the base of the UEI. The actual name of the trap will come after this. I like to improve this just a little bit. After OpenNMS.org, I had vendor/Polycom in this case. And what that happens is sometimes you can't tell from the name of the MIB who the vendor is. And now if I get an error, bam, I get a UEI, and I'm able to say, hey, this is a Polycom device. This is it may help for me to track down who to talk to. Again, it's kind of optional, and you can use whatever you want to here. And so I'm going to put that for here, hit continue. And now all of those events that you saw are actually now in here. Now I'm going to hit save the events file. And what this does is this actually saved the events file into the events directory. So this is an opt OpenNMS etc events. As you can see it right here, saved the file, added a reference to this event file into event column, and it reloaded. So now we're done. I mean, if we were getting unformatted traps, we will now get formatted traps. It's kind of cool. But I want to show you some things you can do to edit this. So I'm going to go back here under Configure OpenNMS, and it turns out under Event Management, you can customize your event configurations. This allows you to, through the GUI, edit these particular files. So I'll type in the Polycom RMX MIB, and here's all these different events. Now, in Snmp, there is no concept of severity. So Snmp doesn't have a built-in severity. So if you remember from our events lesson in OpenNMS 101, we talked about the Severity Legend. And this is something I came up with. So you can come up with your own. This is what I came up with. Too many times people will rely on any problem is a critical event, and anything, any resolution is a normal event. And that's just it. So it's green or red. It's not very, very useful. To me, a critical event is something where I kind of approach the problem from what do you do when a particular event happens. So to me, a critical event is, hey, something massive has gone wrong with our network, and anyone who has the ability to help out stops what they're doing and goes and fixes it. Luckily, there shouldn't be many of these. And I don't have a single trap, many single traps that will actually say, hey, this is a critical event. I usually use an automation or something to say, hey, these events have happened. We got a bit of a correlation, so then I create it as a critical event. The other classes, major means someone, not a whole bunch of people, but someone needs to stop what they're doing and address the problem immediately. Minor is the device needs attention. If you're at lunch, it might wait. Maybe not, but it might. Warning is a device may need attention. This is something that you should note that this is happening, but maybe it doesn't need attention. And then normal means informational only, no action required. Indeterminate is actually the severity we use by default for all of these events. So let's take a look at this first event here, no licensing alarm fault. So if I click on that, you will see there's the event UEI. The event label is automatically generated from the event UEI. And we have all this other stuff. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to edit this. Now I don't have Polycom equipment, and from this event I can't tell. It's basically license not found. My guess is if license not found, this thing isn't going to work. It's not going to run. There's some feature that's not working. Probably needs to be addressed. So to me, I'm going to make it a major. If someone came in here and said it was a wanted to do a minor, I'd be happy with that, because we know that something's wrong on the device. But I'm going to say that license not found, knowing most proprietary equipment, this would actually just stop working. So I'm going to say it's a major event. The other thing I like to change is the log message. Again, this says this is the name of the trap, RMX no license alarm flat received, and then we send in the variable bindings. Useful, yes, but it's not English. It's not clear. So what I tend to do on the log message, this is the short message that appears on the screen, I do something like this. I would say Polycom event, tells me what vendor it is. I might add Polycom RMX event, like that. And then I'll say no license. And then I'll add that %parm1. This is the alarm description. So this will give me, on the log message, some more information about what's going on. I don't think I need the date and time in the log message. I don't think I need the list name. I don't think I need the status. So I'll just get rid of those. So now I have this very straightforward message. It's a Polycom RMX event. It says no license, and then it'll give me a little more information. So I'm going to go down here and save that. Boom! Cannot save the changes. I hit this the first time I tried to record this, and I had to go look. Alarm type. For some reason, alarm type cannot be null. I don't know why. I'm going to open a bug on this, but I figured that it's more important to get this lesson out than it is to fiddle with the GUI. So I'm going to open a bug on this, but I'm going to set the alarm type equal to 1. Alarm type 1 is a problem. You can say alarm type 2 is a resolution, and alarm type 3 is, events that aren't really a resolution or a problem. So I'm going to set alarm type equal to 1, and I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now notice this is all in a particular file. So if I actually go to my OpenNMS instance, go into events, you will see there is a Polycom file here. I usually edit all this stuff on the command line using Vim. It's just easier for me. So if I look for the no licensing default, log message. So oh, great. Because of that bug, it looks like it erased all the stuff I did. So let me quit out of here. Go back to my GUI. If I click on that license, no, that's set up there. So let me go back up here. So I've saved that. Let me save the events file. That'll overwrite the existing file. And now when I go back into here, you'll see that the log message now is that, go down here. License not found. Is that right? Oh, didn't overwrite them yet. So save events file. Yes. Yes. So now it's successfully saved. So let me quit out of here and reload. Yay. There's my stuff. Polycom RMX event, no license, parameter 1, and severity equals major. I like just going through here and setting all this stuff up on my own and just editing. I like search for severity like this. And then I'll go, okay, license not found. I might make that a major. And then I'll switch to this one. And I'll go up and look, and this says no meeting room alarm fault. That's probably resource process did not receive the meeting room list during start. That's like a minor or warning. Set that. Boom, 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 boom. And there's a lot of traps in here. So, but if you didn't want to do this, the moment you save that file is the moment that it gets reloaded on OpenNMS. At least they won't be unformatted. Will it be formatted pretty? Probably not. Depends on how good the MIB is, but for the most part, at least, you'll get events that give you some more information than the unformatted trap event. Make sense? So let's go back to configure OpenNMS, and we'll go down here, go back to the MIB compiler. Now, the second thing we can do is I'm going to hit here, generate data collection. So this creates, for every single object, this actually creates the proper format to do data collection. You probably do not want to do this. If we look here, there's look in the site provisioning table right here, which I have no idea what it does, but the site provisioning table has 81 objects. Here's 20 objects here. There's probably several hundred objects in here. Who knows if they're useful or not? Without actually looking at the MIB, you're not going to know. And so what I tend to do is simply save this file and then go find something that looks interesting. So I'm going to save the data collection file, and I'm going to generate, I almost always say yes to this, generate default graph templates. So you hit yes. And so now I have a new data collection file, and I have a new file for the graph properties. So any of the graphs I do decide to collect will actually have default graphs. Again, might want to make them prettier, but at least I don't have to do the work of generating the initial graph. Now, nothing at this point in time is going to happen until I add the Polycom CMA MIB into an Snmp collection. So what does that mean? Well, I'm going to go here. Let's go to the data collection file. So I'm in OpenNMS Etsy data collection. And you can see there is a Polycom file here. And this has all of the different interesting things that we have. So what I usually do is I copy the Polycom file to something similar, but I put full after the name. So that saves what I've just generated. And now I'll look at the Polycom CMA MIB file, and I'll try and see if there's something interesting I like these scalars. They're usually interesting, but if you look, they're all strings. And so this is just going to be some network information, not really useful to graph that. There was something, again, keeping with our license theme. There was a license set here. So here's something interesting. So here we have the license serial number. We have when the license expires. This reached threshold, license supply version, things like this. So what the heck does all that stuff mean, right? Well, one of the things I can look for is you can actually look at the raw MIB. So if I actually look at the CMA MIB here, and I look for license, CMA config licenses. So there's, how many days left before it. So now we can see what all of those values are. Now, by default, we're limited to 19 characters. So when I'm looking at something here, this has been shrunk down to 19 characters. And so if I go here, I can say, okay, license system serial number, shows you the serial number. That's not very useful. Expiration days is pretty good. License reclaim interval, that probably doesn't change very much. Versions is probably not useful. The type of the CMA server, whether it's primary or the status of the license, status value of the license. License feature table is probably not interesting. This doesn't look all that interesting. But if I wanted to, I could graph out the license expiration in days. Because it'll go up to, it has to be renewed every 90 days, it looks like. And it only exists once on the system. So what I would probably do is go ahead and I want to collect that. So I might just, what number is this? So this is so this is 434. So let me go over these resource types. 118, so 300. So I just deleted 300 events, which should get me down to the license table here. So I just nuked a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm going to get rid of all these other objects. And so now I just have the one little object here. So I have, so I'm going to collect on these 6 variables. Most of them are strings, but it does have the extra. Oh crap! I didn't want that one. What do we have? Where was the expiration? There's the expiration date. This is the one we wanted. So we wanted this second one here. So again, go down here. This is the group I wanted. Now, so there's our group here. Now, the last thing we have to add to here is we actually have to add a system definition. So let me save this. Remember, this was my normal one. The full one still exists. So what I would probably do is, as I go and explore the MIB, I would copy and paste over those things that I want. Now, if I look and see all these other files here, if I look at like NetSNMP, I'll have these system definitions. And so I'm going to copy one of these. And then I'm going to go and edit my Polycom MIB. Just make sure I got that right. Yep. So I'm going to actually paste that in right here. Now, as I mentioned from the in the 101 class, this name has to be unique. So I'm going to put in Polycom CMA. And then I'm going to just assume that it's going to start with 13885 as the enterprise ID. I'm going to delete all these groups except my one. And now I'm going to put in this group here. So this is basically going to go to if any device I discover in OpenNMS has SNMP enabled, and the system object ID mask starts with .1.3.6.1.4.1.13885, it's going to try to collect these object IDs. Now, I might need to refine it a little bit more if CMA devices are slightly different object ID, system object ID than RMX. There's really nothing super wrong with trying to collect something that doesn't exist. It just uses a little bit of resources. But since I'm not quite sure, since I don't have a copy of the system here, I'm not quite sure what to do. So I'm going to leave that as a good guess. And then the final thing I have to do is, if you notice at the top, this is called the Polycom CMA MIB. So I'll save this. In the data collection, config file, I have to add that group. We did the same thing for class. We had a group for class. I'm going to just paste this in here. And notice that this Polycom CMA MIB name, this data collection group name here, has to match has to match this name here, whatever name is in here. And I put it under the default SNMP data collection stream here. I'll put that under the default because that'll work for anything. If I wanted to collect something, say, faster than the system default of 5 minutes, or I wanted to do, treat this in some other special way, then what I would end up doing is probably creating my own SNMP collection group. But usually this is very, very easy to do. And I don't put it in, like all these others are kind of alphabetical. I didn't put it like under this, between in this PowerWare, Postgres kind of stuff. Because I try to put everything at the bottom in case during an upgrade this file gets changed, then all my stuff will be at the bottom and it makes it a lot easier to merge. So that's why I do it there. And if I do that and save it, if everything's working fine, then what should happen is OpenNMS should start doing data collection on those devices. And because there's actually graphs associated with that, I will get a graph. So if I collect that data, I'll get a graph. Now, there's a lot more work needed to do here. I don't know this equipment, and this MIB seems pretty involved, but I could go through the MIB, and I could see if there's anything else of interest that I want, and I could copy and paste that into my main file, and it would start doing data collection. You should not have to restart. Unless there's an error in your file, you should not have to do a restart once you've added it in. You may, if you find that you're not doing data collection and you think you should, then I'd go ahead and do a restart on OpenNMS, but most of the time you don't. So, getting back to what we've covered here, we've added our MIBs in, we talked about the MIB problem. So that was step one, getting the MIB compiled. So we talked about the challenges of getting MIBs compiled. The second thing we did was events. Now, I tend to import all events because there's almost, if I have this particular piece of equipment, chances are that I can get, there's no downside to having all the events configured. I mean, you have a little bit more to search through in the GUI, but there's not really a performance hit. So I just always put all those events in. When it comes to data collection, I try to be a little bit more specific. Things I look for, I like things like temperatures. I just look through the MIB and anything that affects me. If I was dealing with something that dealt with access points, I might try to collect, signal strength. In this case, I think there's conference rooms. Maybe I could see, how many conference rooms were active at any one time. I just have to go through and understand the equipment. It's another thing that we do. You can actually hire us to do a MIB analysis or to come out to your site during a Tune My OpenNMS project, and we can actually help you go through this. And it really does help if the data is actually there. In this case, I just wanted to use a MIB that I knew we didn't have yet. That also had problems. As you can see, we conquered those problems. But this is a lot easier than trying to type all this stuff in by hand. So we do try to make it easier. And I hope this makes it easier for you. So anyway, that's the end of this OpenNMS 101. I hope you guys found it useful. As I said, go out, start your own collection of MIBs. Once you have your MIBs compiled, you won't have to go find them again, and it can really make customizing OpenNMS to your environment a lot better. If you don't happen to have a MIB, please ping your vendors. If you happen to have a support contract, you should be able to ping your vendors and say, hey, send me the MIB files. Some vendors are very open, like Cisco. You can just go to the website and download the MIBs, but other vendors treat their MIBs like proprietary data, so you may actually have to have some kind of support relationship with them to get the MIBs. But once you have the MIBs, get them into OpenNMS, and you can start doing a lot of cool stuff. Anyway, until next time, take care.